Hi, my name is Kevin Snyder of Snyder Law, and I'm an estate planning and elder law planning attorney in Irvine, California, and I help people plan to protect what matters most to them, their loved ones and families, their legacy, and their dignity. And today I'd like to talk to you about why I think estate planning is not just for planning for death, but planning for life. That is a philosophy that I talk about every day with clients, is that we're here first to plan for life. And we're also going to talk about your plans for when death does happen. But we're going to focus and start our conversation in our strategies around planning for life. Why? Because life events happen, circumstances happen in life, and we need to have a plan that responds to that in different scenarios. And many of you have experienced life so far, both the good and the bad. You know somebody that has gone through a very negative experience. They've had a loved one that's gotten sick. They have had a loved one that has suffered from some dementia. Somebody that is going through trying to figure out how they're going to pay for their parents' care in an assisted living or memory care. Somebody who has run into issues with their kids or nieces, their grandkids or nieces and nephews because something happened to the parent and they're struggling with guardianship, or that they're going to court for what's called a conservatorship because they need to be appointed to assist another family member because of dementia, because of a traumatic brain injury, or some other event that's rendered them incapacitated. So maybe some of you know these stories, and that's what we're talking about here. These are things that happen in life other than death, and there's a lot of things that can happen to you and don't kill you and you don't die, but have all these ripple effects that can create these really negative situations. And so I'm not here to be a fearmonger and scare you. I just want to bring awareness to the situation, because we can't go through life with our head in the sand and think that nothing's bad's going to happen to us. Of course, that's just not realistic. So if we go into life with eyes wide open and some awareness, then we can plan around these potentially bad things that can happen, so that we don't create a worse situation out of a bad set of circumstances. So my whole goal is to try to preview this potential pathway and road and say, hey, look at all these potential potholes that are out there for us. Let's create a plan that can maneuver and navigate around them so you don't step in it and create a mess. And so that's what we're doing here when we're planning for life. Some things to consider that we talk to clients about when doing that is planning in advance for medical emergencies, just a practical fire drill. What's going to happen? How are people going to know that something's happened to you? How are they going to access any legal planning or financial documentation that you have that you're going to need them to know about in a medical crisis and moment? What is the plan going to be? Do they know your medical wishes and what types of level of treatments that you would want? And that's not the same for everybody. Everyone's not going to necessarily want the full level of treatment, save my life. Situations are different. So what is the plan? Who can make decisions for you in those circumstances? And that's part of the medical emergency planning that you need to do. And of course, other health events could occur that might not necessarily be an emergency, like a car accident and you're taken to the emergency room, for example, or you had some stroke or a heart attack, you're taken to the emergency room. But we're talking about other health events, like maybe there was a brain injury, there is a diagnosis of a disease or other illness, or there's an onset of dementia, which can of course happen earlier in life than later. It's not always age-related. It could be an early onset of dementia, and there's over 70 different types of dementia. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's aren't just, those are the common ones that are talked about, but they're not the only ones. And so maybe that's left you incapacitated, or either temporarily or permanently. What is the plan in that scenario? Who's going to manage your finances? Who's going to care for you or be responsible for your care? Do you have minor children that you're responsible for? Or if they're not your children, maybe you're a guardian of those children. What's the plan with them? There's things to talk about. And on that note, of course, for people that are parents of minors in California, those are people, minors are people under the age of 18. What would happen to them in a crisis emergency situation? You are on date night with you and your spouse, and you get in an accident and you're taken to the hospital. Again, what's the emergency plan there? But once you have the medical side set, what happens to your kids? Are they at risk of getting taken into custody by the county, at least temporarily, until it could be sorted out who would have legal guardianship of them? This can be hours, days, weeks. That would be very traumatic for them. So what is the plan to consider there? Also, just from a practical aspect, not looking at us in our planning, but other things to think about as far as our life planning goes is other people in our life. And if you're like me, you have aging parents. And so what is the plan for them? What if something happens to them? They have an illness or sickness, they fall and get injured. What is the plan? What's the protocol from an emergency standpoint to a care standpoint moving forward? What does that look like? Because that's going to impact us and the responsibilities that we might feel that we have to take care of them, and that could end up being a financial responsibility as well. So we want to know that up front. Of course, after they pass away, what's that impact to our family? Not just from a financial perspective, but from an emotional perspective as well. So are they planned well, or are they going to leave a problem, a conflict that's out there because we simply never talked about it, and now there are issues that could have been sorted out in life, but didn't have that opportunity, so now it's a big mess. And we see that sadly in fractured relationships with families, infighting that lead to litigation, and which isn't good for anybody. But on a more positive note, maybe your life planning also deals with helping others that are younger in your family. Maybe you have grandchildren that you want to assist and help with paying for school, or or whatever the other endeavors. You want to help support them. But how can you do that in the most tax efficient way and in a way that doesn't hurt them? Because you can have the best intentions, but end up with a poor result simply because you didn't consider things, because you didn't know. You didn't know what you didn't know, and you had the good faith to do something, but it actually ends up being hurtful. A great example of this would be with student aid, and leaving an inheritance for a grandchild in a certain in a typical common way could be, like as an outright gift, could be problematic for them as far as qualifying for student aid, because they have to declare it on the FAFSA form. And there's additional ways that we can strategize around that. Or if they're a grandchild with special needs and they're receiving government benefits from the state, you don't want to disqualify them by leaving them an inheritance. There's other strategies that we can look at and use. And of course, we always want to look at the tax impact too to them for the inheritance that we're giving them. Are there's some things that we can do there in a more tax efficient way to them, never mind to us. And there's ways that we can give without being taxed on that gift too. So things to look at there when we're trying to benefit another generation below us. If we're charitably inclined, what are some of our lifetime goals? Do we want to just make lifetime gifts, or are there other things that we can do, such as give to a charity in the future through a charitable remainder trust? Those are all things to talk about if we're charitably inclined. That's part of our life planning. And then lastly, what is the long-term care plan for us? Often we're encouraged to plan for retirement so we have enough to live on, and those life costs being food, clothing, shelter, and enjoyment, making sure that we have enough to take care of others in our family, like grandchildren, like we talked about. But what if something happens to us, a life event, a health event, and now we need to pay for in-home care, we need to move to independent care, assisted living, memory care, or further on down the road, if our needs are great enough, skilled nursing. How do those costs? Those are real costs. Those are costs that aren't going to be covered by health care from Medicare or other health care carriers, and we're going to have to pay them out of pocket. And how's that going to impact? Has that been factored into our retirement planning? If it hasn't been, what are the solutions that we can do now, or strategies we can employ now to get in front of that? So those are all things to think about. So those are all things to think about now in life while we're still alive, to plan for stuff that happens while we're alive. That's why estate planning is about life planning, even more so than it is about death planning. So my name's Kevin Snyder again. I'm an estate planning and elder law planning attorney in Irvine, California. If you want to know more about this or how it pertains to you in particular, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you and set up a time to connect. And hopefully this video was a value to you. Please check out the website. You can see some other videos that were valuable to others. And I hopefully will be able to talk to you soon. All right, take care.